Matthew Movies coming at you with my review of Ant-Man, the 2015 Marvel Cinematic Universe film that I think was a whole lot of fun, but it's also kind of interesting because whenever I watch it, it always makes me wonder what is different from the film that was originally planned. For those of you who aren't aware, originally this movie was actually in pre-production all the way back when Iron Man, the very first Marvel Cinematic Universe movie, was as well, with Edgar Wright tapped to be in charge of the creative and direct the film. Basically, after an extended period of pre-production and working on the effects and the story, it basically came to pass that Edgar, and Marvel parted ways because they did not see eye to eye on the creative, which was a huge disappointment because I love Edgar Wright's movies. I would call him one of my favorite modern filmmakers for sure. So it always makes me wonder how different it would have been had he stuck around. But it also does feel like you can see some of his trademark style and humor in the film, but it also has a distinctive tone that maybe works better with the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But obviously, since I love Edgar so much, I would have loved to have seen that version. But it still stands on its own as an awesome movie, in my opinion. Starring Paul Rudd as Scott Lang, a character who's down and out. He has a kid that he can no longer see because he basically can't afford a lifestyle where they'd be allowing him to bring that child back into his life. He decides to take one more job because he is a former robber or thief, I should say, and he decides to go take this one last job, and he ends up entering the home of Hank Pym, the original Ant-Man, that sees something in him and decides to make him his successor in order to stop the head of the company he once ran and his evil plot. And that villain is played by an actor by the name of Corey Stoll, who is the guy who ends up becoming Yellow Jacket, the principal villain of this movie. And he chews the scenery in this film for sure. Like, he is over the top evil, but I do think it works for the film because the film is very over the top to a certain degree, and it kind of, I think, demanded that tone because of the fact that it's Ant-Man, this guy who his power is to shrink to the size of an ant but retain the power of a regular person. I mean, it's cool to a degree because you can see how that might be useful, how the guy coming out of nowhere and punching you like a regular person would be a total shock because you wouldn't be prepared for it, so it'd be a lot more damaging. But at the same time, it's also the idea of a guy shrinking to the size of an ant being powerful, so that's a little hard to take as well. So they had to kind of flirt with the whole humor side of it, but there's also a lot of evil to the character as well, so I think it works because it really kind of runs the gamut as far as the various sides of the Marvel movies, where they do have some very big stakes but also a lot of humor. So I think this movie, to a degree, is almost the epitome of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and that is really emboldened in the character of Yellow Jacket. But you know, by the time you have the big fight at the end, which is really, really entertaining in parts, I personally was never all that invested in him as a villain. So I'd say I'd put him in the kind of like the mid-range of the Marvel Cinematic Universe villains. But there's definitely some very, very entertaining aspects of that final film, which were in the trailer, involved Thomas the Tank Engine and some other stuff that really will take you by surprise. Also starring Michael Douglas as the Ant-Man, the original Ant-Man that I mentioned earlier, Hank Pym. I think it's really, really cool to see him on film. As always, I've always been a big fan of Michael Douglas. I think the guy just has charisma coming out of his pores, and he's always great. And it's really cool because they wrote the character in a very, very interesting way, because in the comics he's definitely not straight up hero. He has done some very devastating and dastardly things, so that there is definitely hints at that kind of stuff in the movie as well, which I think is really interesting, and I'm very, very fascinated by where they might take that in the future, because they have announced a sequel to this called Ant-Man and the Wasp. And speaking of that, there is the character that will become the Wasp in that film, played by Evangeline Lilly, who is Hank Pym's daughter, and I think she does a great job in this. Her best role since Lost by far, in my opinion, which isn't saying a lot because she hasn't done all that much, but I thought she was fantastic in this. She brought a lot of character to the film. There was a lot of back and forth between her and Paul Rudd that really worked. They had definitely oodles of chemistry between the two of them, but she also came off like she wasn't amused by his antics throughout. She was really, to me, a big linchpin of the success of this film, and a big reason why this movie works, and I can't wait to see where they take her next. And then you have Michael Pena as basically his buddy, the guy who gets him back into the criminal life, and he's just absolutely hysterical. When he starts telling stories about how he found out information, it's just so hysterical. The guy just absolutely kills me throughout this movie, and you know, of anybody, by far brings the laughs. And every time that he is on screen, just absolutely lights it up. I mean, I couldn't get enough of him. I'm really, really looking forward to seeing more of him back in the sequel. And speaking of the Marvel Cinematic Universe as a whole, which I guess I wasn't, but let's say I was. Speaking of the thing I was just speaking of, right? Wink, 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 blink, blink. Anyways, the major way in which they made this movie a part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, other than like the post-credit stuff, is there is a sequence where Ant-Man fights Falcon from the Captain America movies and Avengers movies, and I thought that scene was really, really great. I loved how they used that to anchor it in there, but it wasn't over the top, just like I thought with Spider-Man Homecoming that came out recently, where I didn't feel like they were over the top, incorporating like a ton of the different Marvel Cinematic Universe movies, which I think was very, very important for these solo films when they start out. I mean, Captain America, the third one, had everybody in the world in it, but by that point they set up the character so well. So I thought it was very, very important that they didn't overdo it, and I thought the whole fight scene with Falcon I thought was very, very fun to watch and worked to perfection. And you know, it was a major strength of this film was the way that they incorporated it into that universe. I really enjoy this movie to a large degree. It's one of those movies that I feel like when I was watching it the first time, I wasn't blown away by it. I wasn't thinking to myself, wow, this was awesome, but I was having a very good time. And then over the subsequent days, I noticed that, you know, I kept thinking about moments from it and chuckling or thinking, oh, that was really cool. And I realized that this movie was a movie that I liked a lot more than I may have thought at the beginning. So those are my thoughts on the film. Let me know in the comment section below what you think, if you liked it, if you hated it, how you thought that they incorporated the MCU, whatever, would you really like to have seen Edgar Wright. Apparently I can't speak, but anything other than that, please hit that like button, hit that share button. It makes it much more likely that other people will come check this video out, which is something I would absolutely adore because I love talking to people about films. And speaking of which, if you're new here, if you just haven't done it yet, please, please, please hit subscribe, hit that notification bell. It'll let you know when I put out a new video and you come and check it out. Other than that, have yourself a good day.